Hello there and welcome to this video. Today I want to have a look at a flapper rig made using the T-knot. It's a simple rig to tie, but it casts reasonably well, at least for a short distance tackle. It doesn't tangle very easily and it's a very reliable rig. Nowadays I've tended to adopt that as one of the two rigs that I always use. Let's see how it's made. To make the T-rig flapper rig, start by pulling off probably about 1.5 meters of line. The knot uses quite a lot of nylon, so it's better to err on the safe side, have a little bit more rather than a little bit less. Now allow a little bit for the weight to tangle off at the bottom, and then make a loop. I'm going to do probably about 5 inches long, probably about 12 centimeters or so, and then from there I'm going to bring it back in itself to make another loop. With that one, because this is 60-pound line intended for beach casting, I'm not going to go through half a dozen times. Probably about 4 or 5 times will be my limit. So 3, 4, that's probably about it for this one. So I'm going to wet it, and then I'm going to pull it tight. Make sure it's nice and tight. And now I'm going to do the second part of the knot. Now, what I tend to do is I put the strands behind the back of the knot, and then I go round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. And then I'm going to open up the central twist, and I'm going to put this loop through and then begin to pull tight. Wet it so that it doesn't do any damage to friction, and then pull up again. So that's a nice tight little T-knot sticking off the main line. So that's room for the bottom hook. Now I'm going to come up a bit. I'm going to do exactly the same again. So I make my loop back round on itself through 1, 2, 3, 4, might get away with 5. In 60-pound line, 4 or 5 is fine. Got away with 5 that time. Start to pull it into position. Wet it before I pull tight. That's the first part of it done. And now, again, I'm going to put twists in the line above it. I just find it easier to do it this way. Osteoarthritis in the fingers doesn't help. So, 7 twists. Now what I need to do is find the middle twist, which is approximately there. Open that up. I'm going to push that through. And now start to pull it into shape. Wet it before you pull it all the way tight, and you get left with a nice square T-knot, nice square mount. So there's my 2 T-knots. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a couple of swivels. First find your right box. I'm going to take a couple of hooks. I'm going to take a bit of silicone tubing. Now, with the tubing, I'm going to measure the length of the knot and allow a little bit more to shroud the swivel. I'll chop that just there, and this is going to need to go onto that nylon. Now that can be a little bit fiddly. Sometimes it works really well, sometimes it doesn't. Wetting it can help, but another way that you can do it is just take yourself a piece of trace line. And then your trace line, because it's thinner diameter than the 60, that will slip through the tubing reasonably easily. He says hopefully. Come on, be a sport. And then what you can do is you can put that end through the loop, go back in yourself, go back through the tubing again, wet it once again, just helps it to go through a little bit easier. There we go. And now, as you pull on the trace line, it will just slip over the 60-pound T-knot quite easily. You can pull it onto the T-knot mount at the bottom, and as you can see from there, you can pull it back and out of the way, compressing the nylon and compressing the rubber. So now I can go through one eye of the swivel. He says hopefully. Then I can go up and over the body in the other eye, and then with a little bit of tweaking, get it to pull down and sit on the other eye of the swivel. There we go. And there he is, nicely held on. So now, keeping it tight, I can push the silicone tubing over the top of the eye of the swivel, perhaps even a little bit of the body. Yeah. And as you can see, I've now got a nicely stood off knot, but I've got a swivel on it as well. Now you might think, well, why not just tie the hook straight onto it? This time of the year, I'm using a lot of fish strips for bait. And one thing you'll find with a fish strip is it will twirl as you bring it in. And if you've got a fish that's caught on it, the chances are it will spin even more. And if you didn't have a swivel on there, your trace would get kinked up, knotted up, tangled and useless in no time at all. So that little bit of shrouded tubing just helps to keep everything separated, nice, neat and tidy. So I'm going to do the same to the other side now. So once again I measure the tubing. So I've got the length of the knot, maybe a centimetre or so to allow for shrouding the swivel. So say about there. Cut that off. This one is not so long a piece of tubing, so it should be easier to get onto the loop. So again, I'm going to use my little bit of trace line trick. I'm just going to push that over the tubing, through the tubing, I beg your pardon, and then I'm going to go through the loop itself. Just lubricating the line, which hopefully will make it travel back through the tubing a little easier. So I push that up. Now I've got both ends. I can pull down, and as you can see, it transfers the tubing onto the T-knot quite easily. So here we go. What I need to do is pull the rubber down a bit, so I can do the same as I did before. Go through the eye of the swivel, over the back, and then help it to compress all the way down, nice, neat and tidy join. And then what I can do, I can use that tubing and I can shroud the swivel properly. So there's the second swivel, also shrouded. So there's the two bits. Now I'm going to look for the longer bit, and I'm going to use the longer bit as the bottom. I'm going to put on a little bit of trace line. I don't want the traces too long, So I'm going to pull off nearly a metre, trim it. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it back, fold it in half, and snip there. So I've now got two pieces of trace line. Going to use the revised grinner knot to attach the hooks. I like this one. It's small, it's neat, it's functional, and what it also does is it presents the tag end straight up the line instead of sticking out at an angle. So when a fish takes, there's nothing to jab it in the mouth, nothing to make it more suspicious than it already is. Pull it tight and trim. So that will now join onto the swivel there. Do it exactly the same way. So the revised grinner is 3 turns round through that first loop, the first twist next to the swivel, pull it into a circle, and then working away from yourself, wrap it around the doubled strands of line 3 times. Get hold of both ends together, pull up, lubricate it of course, and then pull down on your main trace. Trim it. And there's the bottom hook done. So I'm going to measure a little bit past the drooping hook. Flapper rig's a short distance, so I'm not really interested in using an impact lead for its own sake. What I need is just a means of fastening that lead safely. So I'm going to use a fast link. I'm going to use a swivel. And then I can join the fast link to the swivel, pull it up to the head of the link out of the way, and then I can use an impact lead and I can put that down so that's in place. One thing you might notice, I've got a little piece of aquarium tubing on here. The reason I do that is I can slide it off the impact lead and onto the fast link, and there's no way that can accidentally trip and come off. So now again I'm just going to use the revised grinner knot. So 3 turns around, back through the first twist, pull into a circle, working away from yourself, wrap 3 times around the doubled strands, and then pull up before you pull down to leave yourself a nice, neat, tidy knot. So that's the bottom of the rig sorted. Now what I've got to do is use that second trace and attach the second hook. Through the swivel, 3 times round, through that first twist, pull into a circle 3 times round, pull up, wet it, pull down, trim that. Now I'm just going to check the distance from that down to the bottom boom, and I'm going to cut it level with the bottom boom, about 3 inches away, that's all, but it just means it should make it even more difficult to tangle. Tie this one the same way. Pull up, get it back into shape, wet it before I pull down. You always need to wet your line just to make sure that the friction, the heat from the friction, doesn't damage your line and cause a weakness in the rig. So here now, there's the bottom hook, there's the top hook. The last thing I've got to do is attach a swivel to the top, and then that's ready to tie straight onto my main line when I'm ready. I use a little bit bigger swivel than this. If you're trying to bring in a rig which has got like 2 dogfish on it or a couple of big whiting, wouldn't that be nice? Rather than the little pin whiting. But the bigger swivel will just help to keep the rig body nice and straight and free of kinks. That. And there is your completed rig. When you use the T-knot flapper rig, you'll find it's pretty resistant to tangles. Some minor faults do turn up from time to time, but these are usually pretty easily solved. Sometimes the fish on the bottom trace will wrap around the line between that bottom boom and the weight, but that's easily sorted. Just cut the weight off and tie it a bit closer to the bottom boom. On the other hand, you can sometimes find that the hooks will tangle during the cast. In that case, you've got the top trace too long. You need to make sure that it is short enough that it will not reach to the bottom boom, and that'll cut that one out altogether. To put the tackle in perspective, I took it down to Babbacombe Pier in Torbay. It was a bit of a blowy night, there was a cold northeasterly wind, and the fish weren't being particularly obliging. However, I thought it was a good test. To give the tackle a proper test, I thought I wouldn't bother with any extravagant baits like beaver crab. I'd just stick to basic squid. So I got some calamari squid from the freezer, very small ones, chopped them in half and put half on each of the hooks. This is what happened next. As you can see from the video, that first dogfish tangled a little bit round the bottom. Straightforward spin. All I did was I shortened the bottom trace and that put paid to that. I then fished on the rest of the evening and had a few fish. There were 6 anglers down there altogether. I had 5 dogfish, 1 bullhuss, half a dozen whiting. Gentleman next to me didn't catch anything at all on the rig that he was using. I then let him have one of the rigs that I was using, and within seconds of casting out, he had 2 bites, and then he caught a dogfish on it, which I thought was quite interesting. Of the other people who were on the pier, they had 1 dogfish between them all night. So was that down to the luminous tubing, or was it just a selection of different baits? I don't know, but it does seem quite interesting. Something I shall follow up on. Thank you for watching. It's much appreciated. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to find out more about the grinner knot, or rather the revised grinner knot that I used, you'll find that I put a complete description of it in my pulley rig video. Hopefully it'll be useful. Goodbye.